Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So it turns out that I lied. I was totally wrong, and there's another challenge tournament in the works, specifically Corrupted Alliance. So we're expanding our horizons into 4 factions, and for those who don't know, I guess we can talk about it here real quickly. The Corrupted Alliance is all of the Halloween-y factions, as I mentioned in an earlier video, so Demon Spawn, Undead Horde, Dark Elves, and Knights Revenant. And so the tournament, or the dungeon we're going to be tackling for this one, is going to be the Fire Knight once again. So Fire Knight with the Corrupted Alliance, i.e. all 4 of these factions. Now in this case, the tournament is not yet live. It does start, you can see, in 9 hours at the time of this recording, but I have a suspicion that it's going to be identical to the previous 4, so there's probably not going to be a Void Shard and the rewards on the right. There's just going to be more Titan points, potentially more Eternal Soul Coin, so make of that what you will. Another chance for Relentless. However, I will say that this one is going to be probably the hardest one of the 5 that we've had so far, just because broader horizons means more availability of different types of compositions, different teams, and so the more skilled or more late game players are definitely going to be able to create a very, very fast team for these types of dungeons. Of course, it would still be good to check your individual group, because you might get lucky and you might have people that are just not participating, so always check your group and see how easy it is for you to compete. It being easier for someone super endgame to max it out quickly also means that it's somewhat easy for most players to participate in it, just because it's less difficult to build a team. So what stages should you be farming for this tournament? Once again, I will say ignore hard mode. The champions that are predominantly used in that to beat hard mode, even on the lower stages, are not in this faction. You don't have access to a lot of the good freezers. For example, if you wanted to run that, you don't have access to necessarily all of the good enemy max HP champions who are good for this. So I would erase that from your mind and let's focus on normal mode. So I would recommend, if you can, get to stage 24 or 25, because the further you get in the turn attack, or the further you get in the dungeon stages, the more points potential you have from the turn attack tournament itself, because it rewards you for doing higher stages quicker. But if you can't do that, then obviously stage 20, tried and true, will always work. And if that's also too hard, because Fire Knight can be a hard dungeon, particularly if you're in the early or the mid game, then stage 16 with a very fast team will work to some degree, and you still get 6-star gear. But of course, be forewarned that this stage is relatively low, and thus you will not get a ton of points even if you go super fast, just because it's a lower stage and they reward higher stage completions. Stage 25 does offer you the best gear relative to normal mode. Stage 24 gives you a good balance of good gear and energy efficiency, and then stage 20 is the most energy efficient stage of all. Stage 16 is just usually void affinity. In this case it is, and it's just much easier to do while still maintaining the chance at 6-star gear, which could be more important than the rewards you get from the tournament itself, depending on how hard your group is. So speaking of end gamers and fast runs, unfortunately we are going to be using a fairly high-end team myself, just because I do have the availability of the champions. So this is the team I'm going to be running on stage 25, and normally speaking, when I do Fire Knight anyways, I am running stage 25 with a slightly different team. I guess we can take a peek at it here. So they're all named. So this is my normal Fire Knight 25 team. So we still have a lore, we still have Tomb Lord, but a different DPS in there to deal with it. But in this case, to deal with this particular challenge tournament, we have swapped out some of the DPS and we went more of the poison route. I kind of mentioned this in one of my previous videos, that since I don't have a poison detonator as far as activating all poisons, not just partial like Theodore here, of course. But since I don't have a poison exploder, one of the ways you can still use poison is just the tank and poison, or poison tank type strategy here. So we actually brought in Visix the Unbowed, because she does have the AoE provoke, and so that can just lock down the enemy minions, or the enemy waves, and then we can just wait for them to kind of die to the poison from Theodore and Tomb Lord, and a little bit from Dark Gale as well. So more specifically, what are everyone's roles in this composition? Of course, Theodore is our primary poisoner, AoE poison sensitivity, doesn't have a lot of hits, which is not the best for the Fire Knight shield, but it's compensated by the rest of the team. So we have Tomb Lord in here, who is our decreased speed champion on an A1, lots of poisons, also our debuffer, decreased defense, decreased attack. And then the A1 is a triple hitter, which is great for breaking down the shield. Allure, of course, turn meter, control queen, triple hitter on the A1 as well, so that's good for breaking down the shield. Dark Gale, he can extend buffs or extend debuffs, sorry, with his A2 as long as he crits, which is pretty useful for just ensuring that we have debuffs up on the waves for long enough so that they die. But also, again, triple hitter on the A1 that has a chance to activate poisons, which we'll definitely see when we get to the Fire Knight. And then Visix, I tried to fill the slot with other people, and she just ended up being the most effective and safest, I would say, overall. So she still does have a double hitter on the A1 with a bit of a turn meter steal, so she is kind of helping. She also has decreased speed, ally protection, and of course the provoke, as I mentioned. So go ahead and run this team so you guys can see it in action. So this team takes around 3 minutes or so, 2.5 to 3, depending on RNG. And we'll see the gear afterward, but a lot of these champions, or a couple of these champions, do have Relentless, so you're going to see a lot of extra turns, which ironically is bad for turn attack tournaments, because more turns that are not really useful just adds more turns to the counter, but I think it's worth it overall. So we have a bunch of poisons going on. We had a little bit of activation from Theodore, and of course we have Visix in there doing her job, which is provoking the wave so that they don't kill any members of her team, because as you can see, we don't have a reviver, so if anyone starts to go down, we might not have enough hits on the shield. But yeah, I guess there's always the chance of the 3% resist, but if only one enemy champion gets a turn, that's probably fine. We can probably take the hit, primarily because we do have decreased attack. Somewhat redundant, because you can see Tumlor places it on all enemies there, but Dark Kael comes in right afterward and he extends it, but also places decreased attack. So if Tumlor doesn't do it, then Dark Kael will, so we don't have to worry about a attack-based enemy hitting us super, super hard. So Visix is also adding in the ally protection, so if they do happen to take a turn, then we're going to be protecting all of the squishier allies. But usually that's not the case, and majority of the time she's going to land the provoke. So you can kind of see that Visix is in a regen set, shows because she is going to be taking damage from all the hits from all the provoked targets. And so we want her to be able to heal up in between those hits. So regen is definitely a good shout on her. So usually we get to the boss by around minute 2, give or take. I think we're on par for that, and it usually takes Theodore 2 activations to really whittle them down. So here we are moving on to the boss, just under 2 minutes. Like I said, this is the most important part, making sure that everyone opens with their A1s on this so we don't waste important abilities, but also we ensure that we break the shield. And you can see there 12 hits. We have it perfectly tuned so that everyone gets in there and we get it down to exactly where we want. So I elected to start with Tumlord's A2 instead of the decreased defense, decreased attack, just because I know Dark Kael is going to go right after him and start popping poisons just like that. And then we want to have some poisons ready for him to go. But Theodore is the primary poisoner in this situation, so I do have Dark Kael's poison ability turned off, just because we don't need it. I just want him to spam A1s so that he can activate poisons while we wait for Theodore to come back to his A3 activation as well. So with the lore and the decreased speed that we get from multiple sources, Theodore has it on the A1, Tumlord has it on the A1, and Visix, we don't need it. I turned that ability off. She just goes in A1s, but Allure and Visix combined also do turn meter control. So Fire Knight's never going to get a turn. Positive affinity for Allure, so we don't have to worry about weak hits or anything like that. So he's never going to get a turn. Super, super safe team as long as we can get through the waves. And the only risk is like a rogue resist on a provoke. But I think there's enough robustness in this team that it's going to work every time. So this is the team that are going to be running, and we could see here just under 3 minutes and 105 turns. All right, so let's take a look at these champion builds for this team composition. And again, I will reiterate that showing you guys their builds is not meant for you to necessarily copy the builds, because mine are built for usually different areas outside of these challenge tournaments, and I just put them together in the right combination to get a successful run. So starting off at the top, we do have my Theodore, who we did see in the Dragon tournament for Night Rev. And his total stats are as follows: 65,000 on the HP, 3,200, just under 3,300 on the defense, 242 on the speed, really high resistance and really high accuracy, because again, I do use him in Hydra Clan Boss at the moment, but I also want him to be capable of doing hard mode dungeons without getting a bunch of debuffs on him. So that's why his stats are so high. He's in a combination of Immortal, Perception, and resistance gear, and I am taking advantage of the stat bonus of Brimstone, 4-star blessing on him, and that gave me extra stats, so that allowed me to convert into the Immortal set from, I think, double Perception and resist. And I also forgot to mention before that I did manage to get him in a refresh ring, so every so often we can get a back-to-back poison and HP burn activation, so that is pretty handy. And masteries, we will not forget it this time. Masteries, because I intend to use him eventually, hopefully, for Ice Golem. I don't want him to have War Master, but if you're using him general content outside of Ice Golem, then you can go down the offense tree. But I went down defense and support and specifically ended on Oppressor because that increases his turn meter fill rate, meaning he gets more turns sooner, up to 10% for all the active debuffs cast by the champion. And of course, we get decreased speed and we get a bunch of poisons going on. So he's definitely going to be sitting at the maximum cap basically at all times. So just more turn meter fill rate on this champion. Next up, we have Visix the Embode, the daily login reward champion. Like I mentioned, she is in a regen set, and she's been through the ringer, I must say. I've stolen a lot of her gear over the months or over the years to use on other champions who are kind of more important as far as utilizing my regen gear. But I did fix her for today just to give her, put her back in the regen set. She was sitting like half naked earlier. So regen and speed is her combination. You can see all the gear pieces are not necessarily maxed, and because she's just a super supportive, super tanky champion, it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this dungeon. So on the HP, it's a little bit low because the gloves are HP percentage and they're not maxed out, but she should be somewhere around 45-ish thousand HP once that would be maxed. 3,300 on the defense, 230 on the speed, so just relatively fast, not super quick, and then 310 on the accuracy. Again, the banner you can see there is level 12, so it's not maxed out, so that's an accuracy banner, so she would probably be closer to around the 350 range, somewhere in the ballpark of being able to do Doom Tower hard type stages, which is what I used to use her for, believe it or not. No blessings on this champion, and for the masteries, we can take a look. Oh, let me bring her out so we can look at that. She's in the vault. In this case, I did go down the offense tree because I used to use her, like I said, in Doom Tower, controlling the waves. I upgraded to other champions. Let me know if you guys want to see the team I run on auto climbing for Doom Tower in future videos. I can definitely do a showcase of that. But coming all the way down here, so you guys can see it's behind my head, to War Master, hug in the left side, pretty standard offense tree type stuff, making sure to go through Life Drinker just in case she gets low, she's able to heal a little bit. But more focusing on the support tree, of course, coming all the way down to Master Hexer for the extension of the decreased speed. And I guess I'll echo one thing from other content creators that Visix the Embode is relatively underrated for Hydra Clan Boss. I don't personally have her on any of my teams at the moment, but she does have Provoke for the Head of Decay. She has decreased speed, ally protection, and obviously the A1 turn meter manipulation doesn't work. But nonetheless, still a solid champion that you are going to get just by playing long enough, 270 days. So honorable mention to her specifically being used in the Hydra Clan Boss. So next up on the team, we've seen him before as well, my Tomb Lord here, who I kind of reworked a little bit. He's just now in Resilience gear. I took off the Perception set because he just didn't need it. He was kind of over capped on accuracy. So reworked him, just make him a little bit tankier. So 52,000 on the HP, 3,200 on the attack, because he does have full crit rate for the A2 in order to place all the poisons. 2,300 on the defense, 256, very fast on the speed, full crit rate again for the A2, a little bit of crit damage, and then enough accuracy for Doom Tower bosses as well as hardbone dungeons. Tomb Lord here is of course unawakened, so no blessing. And for the masteries, similar to Visix, we kind of focused on the support and the offense tree, came all the way down to Giant Slayer behind my head, so you can see that Giant Slayer, of course, triple hitter on the A1 makes this the most optimal for his unique case. But other than that, we're hugging the left side of the offense tree, and then we're coming down the support tree here and ending on Master Hexer to extend the decreased defense, decreased attack, and potentially the poisons as well as the decreased speed. So lots of debuffs, lots of good extensions. You don't need Sniper because he does have a 100% chance on everything, so you can pick up something else on the offense tree to compensate. Up next, we have Dark Kale, who we have not seen in a while on the channel, but his build has not really changed in that same time span. So Relentless here and Perception. Again, he's really good because of the A1 here. We can just keep activating poison, so the more turns he takes, the more chances he has to activate poisons, which can really speed up runs in dungeons. So his total stats are as follows: 43,000 on the HP, on just under 3,000 on the attack. Don't really care about the attack. I built him more as a tanky person just to survive. 2,400 on the defense as well, 244 on the speed, so quite quick. Want him to be able to lap enemy waves. Full crit rate because you do need that to extend debuffs on the A2. Don't care about his crit damage whatsoever. And then a little bit too high. I tried to fix that earlier today, but I couldn't find pieces to bring him down closer to 350 and just compensate for the perception set, but 389 on the accuracy. For the blessing, I did opt to go with cruelty because he isn't relentless, meaning he does take a lot of turns, and he does also have an AoE on the A2, so this can help lower the defense of enemies and lower the defense of the boss once he starts popping off with extra turns on the A1. Ramps up very, very quickly to the maximum capacity of whatever level blessing it is, only 2-star. As far as the masteries are concerned, identical, similar, I should say, to Tomb Lord, same logic. Coming down here on the offense tree to Giant Slayer, triple hitter on the A1, and then we're hugging the left-hand side of the offense tree, and we're hugging the right side of the support tree coming down to Master Hexer. And in this case, you do want Sniper because it does increase the chance of him activating poisons and HP burns on the A1, which is very, very powerful. So make sure to get Sniper on your Dark Kael. He is a Doom Tower champion, Doom Tower normal, so you can't get more copies of him, unfortunately, but he is super, super solid, so do not sleep on Dark Kael. And last, of course, we have the Queen herself, also in Relentless and Perception. Identical build, I would say, to Dark Kael overall. So she is trying to be a little bit tanky as well, but a little bit squishier, I would say, because I do want her to be easy to kill for Dark Fae specifically. So 34,000 on the HP, 2,600 on the attack. We don't really care about that. 1,800 on the defense. Her base is super, super low, and I didn't try to compensate that. Again, keep her squishy for Dark Fae, mirror copies, that is. 251 on the speed, just one speed faster than the Dark Fae, which is a particular full crit rate. Just to get the power of the A1, you do need to crit in order to decrease turn meter. A little bit of crit damage, and then enough accuracy all the way up for Doom Tower hard. As far as blessings are concerned, you can see that Allure has 1-star cruelty as well, so it is a bit redundant, but in this case they're usually not paired together, so they happen to be overlapping with this, and so it just makes it ramp up to the base value even faster. I do have my Allure booked. Just I needed some points during CVC is basically the only reason I did it, but you can absolutely get away with running her unbooked, so you don't really have to worry about that. When it comes to the masteries, you're seeing the pattern here. Triple hitter on the A1 does mean we hug the left side of the offense tree, come down to Giant Slayer, and then I didn't even finish the other tier 5s, or none of the tier 5s aside from the one to get to Giant Slayer, and then a little bit down the support tree getting to Lore of Steel and Evil Eye, just more turn meter, and then boosting stats of the perception set. So of course you might not be able to build my exact team, so let's talk about the other champions in these factions that can do work for you in the specific challenge tournament. Let me of course point out that these factions do encompass the Demon Spawn, which we did feature in the Demon Spawn only Fire Knight tournament earlier. So that means that your Demon Spawn team from whenever that was, a week ago or so, will definitely work again for this tournament if you can just keep it the exact same whatever stage you were doing, and it will work. But since you can also add champions from the other three factions, I do encourage you to expand your horizons and see if you can build a better team that can go further or go faster, just because you have more champions at your disposal. We're going to try and get through this as quickly as possible. We'll see if I can actually live up to that promise. But starting off with the category of turn meter control, because of course that is imperative to keep the Fire Knight shield down. You don't want him taking too many turns because he does smack pretty hard. So in the Demon Spawn, we already talked about Allure, but I will honorably mention once again Skimfos, underrated champion who does have the ability here that can steal turn meter, which is different than just depleting. It means he gains the turn meter that he removes, and so he's very, very useful for keeping the turn meter on the boss down, but also kind of snaking in and getting more turns. Decrease speed chance on the A1 with a little bit more turn meter control, and then AoE decrease attack, so the waves will hit you less hard. Void affinity, so you can use them on any stage and you will definitely work on all your teams. Outside of there, I would say Undead Horde doesn't really have that many, but I will honorably mention Morrigan, a previous fusion champion. She does have decreased speed on the A1, akin to Tomb Lord in my composition, but also has this turn meter manipulation ability here on a 4-turn cooldown, the mini Lysandra ability. So it fills your turn meter of all allies, but also places increased speed, meaning that your team is going to get more turns than the boss, and then you're also depleting his turn meter slightly. Granted, turn meter effects are halved when you're dealing with stages beyond stage 21, including hard mode. I guess hard mode's a little different entirely, but so it's half of this as far as depleting his turn meter, but nonetheless you're boosting your team's turn meter, which is still advantageous. For the Dark Elves, we did already mention Visix, but I do want to highlight a champion that probably most people don't have. I happen to have her myself, but Blind Seer is substantially underrated for this dungeon, because this ability here, her A1, it's not as powerful, admittedly, as Allure's, but still 3 times at random, and each hit has a 40% chance when booked of decreasing the turn meter by 15%. So that can add up. You can also run her in a relentless set and just have her spam A1s on the shield. It's also a triple hitter, so really good for breaking the shield and really good for keeping the turn meter down. Void legendary, totally understand, but if you do have her sitting around, she can definitely help you out in this case, specifically if you might not have an Allure. Aside from that, whilst in this faction, I will mention that Sylar does have the capability of decreasing turn meter by 40%, but also placing the decreased speed, which you do want in this fight, and then having AoEs on the A1 and the A2 makes her viable in a stun set, so she can be your control champion for the waves as well. And of course, we cannot fail to mention the Queen of Fire Knight, which is of course Cold Heart, enemy max HP hit, quad hitter on the A1 with heal reduction, which is useful if the Fire Knight ends up taking turns, and then usually people shut off the A2. So I didn't feature her in my team. She could have been in the Visix slot, but she kept dying during the waves, which meant that we weren't getting the Heartseekers on the boss, and so it was kind of pointless to bring her in anyways. Starting back at the top in the debuffer category, let's talk about Demon Spawn. So honorable mention to Sissy of Flametongue, who does have decreased defense and weaken. Unfortunately, you will only have one enemy when you get to the Fire Knight, so you won't get the benefit of decreased defense, but nonetheless, you do have a full chance to place weaken, and of course also placing and activating HP burns, so it can, akin to activating poisons, it can help deal damage while the boss is not taking any turns. Of course, we also can mention Gorlos Helma, who I featured in my Demon Spawn team, AoE decreased defense on a 3-turn cooldown, so you can definitely do that job as well to set up your DPS for the waves. For the Undead Horde, you know him already, Vlad the Nightborn, the only AoE decreased defense champion, unfortunately, in the faction, who is a Void Legendary and previous fusion if you were around or playing back then. But if you weren't, then he's a Void Legendary, so you probably don't have him. But nonetheless, if you do have him, you happen to get him, AoE decreased defense. Void Affinity means he works on all stages, plus the block active skills, which is a form of CC, so the enemy waves cannot deal or use their main skills or whatever. They can only use their A1s. So for the Dark Elves, of course, you have Lydia, usually paired with Seer or any type of DPS, but in this case, Seer's not in the appropriate factions, but nonetheless, AoE decreased defense and weaken, she will always work. Increase speed as well and strengthen, so you can go a little bit faster and take a little bit less damage. You do also have Ghostborn, if you're lucky enough to have him, increase attack and also the guaranteed or cannot be resisted decreased defense, so he's one of the most consistent champions debuffers in the entire game, but make note of the Spirit Affinity, so he might not work on all stages. In the case of Fire Knight, I think he's good for stage 20, 24, and 25. And if all else fails, then you can definitely use your arena build for Madame Ceres, because she is a debuffer akin to Tomb Lord, decrease attack, decrease defense. Just again, it doesn't attack, so be ready to use a different ability on the Fire Knight shield if you're desperate in having to run her. For the Knights Revenant, we talked about Tomb Lord already, and of course the Epic, not an equivalent, but the Epic, who does have AoE decreased defense, would be Thylesia on a 3-turn cooldown. And note, you do not need books in her to get it to 100% chance. It's by default 100% chance, but books will bring it down to a 3-turn cooldown, which could probably be useful. So back to the top once again, let's talk about the supports. And I tried to narrow this down to the champions who are really, really good for this dungeon, and not just every champion who can be useful on a team. So I leave you to fill in the gaps here as far as champions that are going to help your team progress depending on where you are in the game and who you have. So first off, of course, Prince Kymar, King of the Resets. If you do have him, then he can enable your team to reset on wave 2 and do the exact same thing on wave 1. If you have a team that can blow up wave 1, or it can just nuke wave 1. So of course, Prince Kymar, good mention there. Drexthar, I think, is an honorable mention because he's a mix of CC, a little bit of damage, but more importantly, the triple hitter on the A1, which can help you break down the shield if you don't have anything else. Duchess, of course, can make your team 100% success because she cannot die effectively with her passive and the healing and the revive, so she can keep your team running if you do need that to work. Helicath, in a similar fashion, can keep your team alive with block damage, so if the waves take turns, you're not going to die because you're under block damage. You can kind of sit there and hide. Honorable mention to Achak the Wonderin. Where did he go? There he is. AoE freeze, so you can do a little bit of CC. It is a 90% chance, so it's not a 100% chance, so it can just not land, but nonetheless, it is pretty useful to have an AoE freeze, a little bit of CC. And if you're absolutely desperate for a revive, Dur the Hunger is in the Demon Spawn faction, and he does have a revive here for 2 random allies, and I did use him in my Demon Spawn team specifically, but I think it is very, very possible to focus more on the control turn meter manipulation and some other form of nukage to deal with the waves, and thus you shouldn't, or try not, have a reviver on your team unless it's absolutely necessary. For the undead horde, we can start off with CKG, Crypt King Grawl, AoE HP burn, but also the AoE freeze, which is extending the burns to 3 turns. So he's a mix of CC and a little bit of AoE damage through the due to the burns. So he can definitely do some work as far as controlling the waves for your team. Battle Khazar, I'll mention him just because he is really good when paired with a poison explosion type composition, which is possible for this iteration of the tournament because of the expanded factions. So he's a great setup, just being able to place AoE poisons, similar to Theodore, but minus the poison sensitivity. Coming down to the epics, we do have Seeker. I think he's just good to mention because he does have a double hitter on the A1 multi-hit, but also this his only active ability really keeps your team running. So you'll get a lot more turns than usual just because he's filling your turn meter by 30%. Increased attack can help your nukers do more damage as well, but most importantly, he's just keeping your team running with a constant turn meter fill. And then Vogoth, I think, is very, very strong for this dungeon. Triple hitter on the A1. Of course, his passives that will heal all allies by the damage that he receives, and then the chance to provoke on the A2 and place decrease attack. I wish that was not conditional, but decrease attack only on targets who receive the provoke. I wish that was just a generic decrease attack. But triple hitter, most important thing on the A1, but also just a support tank for your team. He can definitely work. Really, really underrated, I would say, for lower level mid game type Fire Knight content. For the Dark Elves, let's start off with Lanicus the Chosen, which is an ally attacking option here on the A2. So ally attack is one of the ways that can help you break the Fire Knight shield, just because you're bringing in other allies. They use their A1s, and if you have a bunch of multi-hitters alongside her, they can just chunk the shield down and make it a lot easier to get through the 12 hits or 10 hits or 7, depending on, or all the way up to 21 if you're doing hard mode. But depending on the number of hits you need, check out the A1s on your champions, but also compare it if you're running an ally attack champion, and Lanicus the Chosen is the one that will definitely work. Xavia is technically not a support, but in this capacity, I'm saying a support in the sense of she's the poison exploder for the team. If you want to use her in that way, and she can make you zip through the waves very, very quickly, provided you have the setup with a Battle Khazar or Theodore or some other Tomb Lord or some other poisoners alongside her. But detonating all the poisons here on this ability can just kind of blitz a wave down, and if you have some sort of reset champion, Kymar, or a champion we'll talk about in a bit, she can just help you do the exact same thing on wave 2 and just get to the boss very, very quickly, reducing the amount of turns, which is good a turn attack tournament. Honorable mention, of course, to Tramaria, who most people probably won't have, and she's probably getting a bad rap because she probably should be stronger, admittedly, but she does have an AoE on the A1, so good for stun set, places decreased speed, akin to Theodore. AoE stun here as well, so a little bit of CC, and then she decreases their turn meter for enemies without a stun. So on the Fire Knight himself, it would be a turn meter decrease, so decrease speed, turn meter decrease, and then here it's a turn meter fill of all allies. It's a full cleanse as well, but more importantly, for the sake of the Fire Knight, you can just keep boosting your team on a 3-turn cooldown, filling a turn meter by 15%. So if you're lucky enough to have her, she can definitely work in this dungeon. A little bit of providing the buffs and debuffs and turn meter manipulation that is somewhat helpful. Again, if you do need a reviver, Caden can work. He does have 2 random allies, 50% HP, increased defense, but again, I would try to make a team that does not require a reviver, because that's one more slot that you can have for DPS that can just speed up the run and make it faster. Because again, turn attack, we're trying to minimize the amount of turns, and having a support that's only useful if people die is not necessarily good use of turns. Night Revenant, similar vein, we can skip down to the epics because that's where everyone is. Same thing applies, or same thing about revivers applies to Rectored Wrath. You can use her at Malkith. You can use him as well. But as far as the actual supports, you can say Golden Reaper, who's kind of a slightly better than Haikatun turn meter filled champion, but she does also have decreased attack AoE for the waves if you're worried about taking damage. And then, of course, the rare, the mini Kymar here, Renegade here, with Sacrificial Ritual, which reduces the cooldown of all ally skills by 2 turns, which is not a full reset, but if you run your champions fast enough, they should be able to take that extra turn at the start of wave 2, and then be back to their primary abilities on their second turn on wave 2. So it can definitely work. And then you can shut off this ability here until the Fire Knights himself, triple hitter on the A2, which is nice for, again, breaking the shield. And time, how did I do? I won't know because I'm recording, and of course it'll be truncated once I get around to editing it. But for you guys, you'll know exactly how long it took me to run through all of those champions. And you know what? I'll send a special shout out to all of you that are still watching, still sticking with me through that long portion of the video. Much appreciated, and you guys are the real ones. But of course, that brings this video to a close. So be sure to comment down below and let me know if you're going to be participating in this tournament at all, what stage you're going to be running, and what team you're going to be running on that stage. As always, if you found this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to hit that subscribe button down below as well. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.